the guy who wrote the song's like, I can't rhyme much with Kotter. He's like, I'm just going to have to go off the rails here and make something different.
Otter. Here are some words that rhyme with Corey. Allegory.
What a fun song.
Pot.
You say hot rhymes with Kotter?
Pot.
Pot?
It's still
Pot.
Kotter
rhyme.
and pot don't rhyme.
Do you mean Potter?
Sure.
That's not how rhymes work. It's not the front part.
Slaughter.
Did we just uncover another very basic thing Gordo should
Yeah, Gordo doesn't know how to rhyme.
You're a musician and you don't know how to rhyme.
I also don't know how to play an instrument too, so let's be fair.
Welcome back, everyone, to S1E1, the show where each week we pick a different sitcom, watch just the first televised episode, and forgetting anything we might know about the future run of that show, rate it and decide if it's a show we want to greenlight or cancel. This week we're going to be talking about Welcome Back, Kotter. Welcome Back, Kotter went 95 episodes over 4 seasons on ABC. Today we're talking about episode 1, which is called The Great Debate, originally airing September 9th, 1975. So to get things started, I'm Jay Gags. With me as always, the boys, Nick, Gordo, Ferg, and Joe. What's going on, guys?
Hey, yo, hey, yo.
Oh! Good old Yaha Feldman.
But Jay, did you enjoy watching just the first televised episode of this?
Yeah, so, I guess just to get into it, this was another, it's my fault, technically. So Welcome Back, Kotter is another episode where pilot is not the first episode. I knew that and told everybody that. But when I downloaded the episodes to have them ready for everyone to watch, the thing I downloaded mistagged the episode. So it called episode 1, The Great Debate, but it was actually the pilot episode. I watched it and then reminded everyone after I watched it again to make sure they watched the right episode, and then realized I watched the wrong episode.
I should have noticed that the pilot did not have a debate, let alone a great one.
Yeah.
I would go as far to say that this episode did not have a great debate either.
So towards the end, after we're done, like we did when this happened with Coach, I think like me and Ferg can maybe take a second and maybe talk about what we saw in the pilot episode and maybe hypothesize why they would have swapped it, but I don't know if there was a glaringly obvious reason this time.
No.
Well, upside of them doing it this way, we got James Woods.
Yes.
I was super surprised to see him pop up.
He popped in. I was like, is that fucking James Woods?
I had to go into IMDb to make sure it was him because he was so skinny. I was like, is this just a dude that looks like him? Or like...
Yeah, I didn't catch it at first, and then I'm going back and looking at stuff. I'm like, wait, that is James Woods. One of 2 Oscar-nominated people. Him and Travolta, both Oscar-nominated actors.
Yeah, because of Battlefield Earth, right?
I believe it was that or Michael.
I'm sure Juan Epstein won a Razzie.
R.I.P. Come on.
Juan Epstein is the lead in a movie from 1981 that I found today that I cannot wait to watch, that is streaming free on Prime. What is it called? Underground Aces. It's like a Police Academy style movie, but about people who park cars, like valets, underground, and like 1 billion people are in it, including Frank Gorshin, the Riddler, whose name is Freddy Krueger in it, like 4 years before A Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm like obsessed with seeing this movie. Michael Winslow from Police Academy is in it. There's also another Police Academy reference in here too, Jay, so you better get ready because we will have a reason to bring up a certain somebody.
Also, we talked a couple of weeks ago, like maybe we should bring up like the tomato meters and stuff like that. Nothing on for Welcome Back, Kotter on Rotten Tomatoes.
I still don't get it.
There's no rating?
No, not for either. The show as a whole, no.
Wow.
But I can say that the show as a whole on IMDb gets a 7.6. And then if we were to go to just this episode alone, this episode also gets a 7.6.
So by the Gordo meter, you would be throwing only 30% of your Rotten
No,
Tomatoes.
this is IMDb. So I don't know what IMDb would be throwing. And for those of you who listen to us, if you listen every week, you would know that, or at least the last few weeks, you would know Gordo doesn't know what Rotten Tomatoes is.
Or math.
Or Top Gun.
And then it's
or an antagonist.
Welcome Back, Kotter goes. Did you guys watch this show? I mean, it was obviously this came out before we were even alive, but it had a big Nick at Night run in the 90s.
Yeah, this is a classic Nick at Night show.
Yeah.
This is another one that when it was on Nick at Night, it really bothered me because it didn't go with the whole trend. It was Kotter Fridays. There was no fucking like that didn't
Welcome
sound
Back
good.
Wednesdays makes way more sense.
Exactly. But they already had Bewitched Be Wednesdays, which I also didn't like.
I also remember not being super stoked when this came on. I was like, shit, okay.
See, I always liked the show. This was my pick, and there was a couple reasons for me to pick this one. I did like it. We haven't really represented a lot from this timeline as much lately, so I thought it'd be good to mix it in. Also, I figured it was simple, and I wanted something that wasn't going to be super hard to prepare for.
This is definitely a simple episode.
In theory, you were right until you fucked up.
Yes. And I guess the whole reason it even got a Nick at Night run was there was like this big resurgence. Like after John Travolta did Pulp Fiction and like became a big star again, that's when they were like, oh, we should scoop this up and put it on Nick at Night.
Not all the Horseshack fans clamoring.
Yeah.
I totally forgot that John Travolta was in this.
Really?
Vinnie Barbarino, it's his most famous thing.
Barbarino.
You know, it just never clicked when I was younger, I think. Because like I said, I remember watching this at Nick at Night when it first came on and never clicked that it was John Travolta. I almost said Tony Danza. John Travolta. And then watching this tonight, I'm like, holy shit.
To be fair, Tony Danza could have played that character. I could see
Yeah.
your confusion.
They both kind of look the same, too.
This came out in 75, and then it was only a 4-season run, but by the 4th season, he had already come out with Saturday Night Fever, Grease, and Carrie, and then it was like he was too big of a star to be in the show.
I think he's not even in the last season very much, right?
He's in like, I think it was 8 out of the 22 or so episodes, and he was getting paid $2,000 an episode, which at the time was very good. And he was listed as a special guest star every time he was in the episode. So he only did like less than half.
I was going to go look this up, but I figure it might be a good topic of discussion, and you guys could just inform me instead. What was Gabriel Kaplan known for? I almost called him Gabe Kapler there for a second.
Oh, Gabe the Babe?
Yeah, Gabe the Babe Kapler. No, what was he known? Because the opening scene of the show and then the actual, like, because they have like that, like a teaser intro almost, and then the actual opening scene of the show, he gets a huge applause. Is he very well known at this point? Because I don't know
He was a
what
comedian.
He was
Oh,
a
okay.
comedian, and he did like Johnny Carson a few times, but he wasn't like huge or anything like that.
Well, here's the thing, though. You kind of forget about this in the world we live in now, right? Like, if you were a comedian and you did Johnny Carson, there was like 2 things on TV at all at 11 o'clock at night. So, like, if you did something on Carson, the whole world pretty much saw you. So, like, Chico and the Man, a show from around this time, a couple years before this, with Freddie Prinze, he went on Johnny Carson. He killed it on Johnny Carson. He had a TV show within like a month. They were like, oh, okay, the whole world saw this guy and likes him. Let's move quick. So if you did a show like the Tonight Show or you did any of those slots and you got a good reception, they pretty much pushed you into a TV syndication deal. And that's why everybody had like 5 clean minutes to do, because you wanted to have like a good set for TV. And that's pretty much how, I mean, this is like, he would talk in his stand-up bits about like growing up in the Sweathogs, and this is like based on his youth. So like, it's like the Tim Allen thing. You just sort of move the comedy into a plot.
I also thought he had died, but he is alive and well.
What's funny is if you look him up now, he's more known for poker now than he is for acting.
Really?
He was
I didn't know
like,
that.
in the heyday, he's still active in it, but like in that huge run when everybody was watching Texas Hold'em on television,
Yeah.
he was like on the final table like 3 or 4 years like in a row.
No
Like
kidding.
he's like a big poker player.
It's funny, the whole world forgets about this, but like anytime you go to like a Goodwill, you will see just like piles of Texas Hold'em sets because everybody bought one. Every one of us played poker, and I'm going to tell you this up front. I don't think I ever knew how to play Texas Hold'em right, and I still don't, and I'm sure I lost like some money by not knowing what the fuck I was doing, but it
We
was
would
fun.
still play like up to pretty recently. It's just more like a lack of a place to play, but we used to go to Nick's house and play. Years ago, we used to play in
I
my
love a
basement.
good poker night, man.
I mean, you see it in TV shows, and when you do it in real life, it is just as satisfying. It's like a bunch of people with too many drinks. Nick's basement, that was just a chimney after a while of everybody just chain smoking and drinking and playing poker all night. It was really fun times.
Back then, I would even buy like those backwoods, like pre-rolled,
Yep.
hand-rolled cigars.
The Clint Eastwood cigars.
Chuff on those in a little tiny basement for 7 hours. It's disgusting.
There was like a cultural change because I think growing up we knew poker like to be like playing standard 5-card draw, and then Texas Hold'em just burst onto the scene on television, and that became the poker everyone started playing.
It always bothered me that it was on ESPN, though. I'm like, this isn't a sport.
Yeah, that should be like on the Game Show Network or something, right? Like, it's not a sport.
I'll say there's some physical demands to sitting at those tables as long as they do. Like, they legit are on those tables all day long. Like, that's a strain.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing you don't see in like movies and TV when it comes to a poker game. It's because I've been at a poker table, like when I would host a poker, like you're there 6 hours later. You've just been throwing the same $50 back and forth, basically winning, losing. And it's just like, oh my God. And that's why every poker game ends the same way. It's like, fuck it, I'm all in, or fuck it, let's split the pot, because nobody wants to sit there. It's 3:00 in the morning. You're tired. You're done. And it's just a lot. You got to be like a serious poker player to be able to. Maybe that's why it's a sport. It's just a sport of endurance sometimes.
It's an endurance test.
Yeah.
It's like Monopoly. Like, no one wants to keep playing Monopoly when you're 4 hours in and you just keep landing on somebody's stuff and you just keep trading back and forth being broke. Like, it's just not fun after a while.
That's when you accidentally tip the board. Like, oh, this game's over.
That's a you move for sure.
Risk is like that too.
There's just that moment where you know you can't win anymore, and then it stops being fun, and you have to wait it out. Like, I have some money, I don't have any property. Like, okay, let's just keep going.
I find other creative ways to pay my rent.
I don't know if Nick was there. You might have been. Gordo one time called me. I was working in the city, and he said, hey, we're all getting a bunch of beer. We're going to hang out. We're going to do all this stuff. And I was like, cool. And I had just finished, and they're like, we got you beer. Just come. Just give us money when you get here. I'm like, that'll be awesome. We're like 22 or something. I take the train all the way down to Gordo's old apartment, and I get there, and they've got, like, the fucking Cones of Dunshire game. Just this giant setup all sprawling.
I was not there for that.
It was Access and Allies.
You fucking dork.
It was just fucking pieces and boards, and it was like a 9-hour game, and the trains had stopped running at this point, and I wasn't going to walk home from your apartment. I think for a while there was a picture of me with my headphones and my iPod on, just sitting in the corner with the beer, because I was like, I will not play this stupid game with you fuckers.
Yeah, we had bought Axis and Allies, and it's a more in-depth Risk.
Risk takes too long.
Yeah, exactly. A more in-depth version of the game that already
takes 8 hours. If you invited me over to play Risk, I'd say no. I'm like, no, that game takes hours. Like, absolutely not.
Yeah, and this apparently is far more involved. That like requires tactics on the ground, in the air. You have like air troops, ground troops, tank troops.
You know what's funny?
Goof troops.
I wasn't there for this, but I can tell you how it went. I can pretty much think of who was playing, and I can tell you that none of them actually knew how to play, but all acted like they knew how to play, and it was just a clusterfuck for 4 hours.
That sounds right.
We legitimately bought it that day and went, oh, it's going to be just like Risk.
So why did you fucking buy Risk?
That's a valid point.
Well, in any event, let's get into Welcome Back, Kotter. So, Welcome Back, Kotter, I think we should... The only other tidbit I think I wanted to get into before we even started talking about the episode was, did you read about how Boston didn't even want to air it at first? Like, I think at first they didn't for maybe the first couple episodes.
Yeah, because we're going through the busing stuff.
Yeah. Boston, which has a reputation for severe racism, which I hope is dealt down. We've talked about this before, but at that time, there was the forced busing, trying to integrate everyone into the same schools and not separate everybody. And that was not going over well. And this was, again, this is only 75. You know what I mean? We think
it's not that long ago.
All this stuff is like ancient history, but this was like our parents going to high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just outright didn't play it for like the first season because they were afraid that showing the harmony of an integrated school was like, this should be a good example.
They were like, we can't play this. There's a black guy in it. That might be weird.
Yeah.
But eventually the show was like an instant hit, and by like an episode in, they're like, never mind, we'll play it. The show starts with Gabe Kotter, and he's home on the couch with his wife, Julie, and they're talking about like the next vacation they're going to go on, and Gabe goes into this like anecdote about his uncle, and not to get ahead, but that's just kind of like an every episode thing. There's always these stories about his uncle to like start and stop these episodes.
Now, I assume that's what his stand-up was, is these uncle stories.
I'm sure it's mixed in there. I've never actually just sat and watched his stand-up, to be completely honest.
I've definitely seen clips of it, but I probably should have watched some. But I think it was mainly Sweathog stuff, and I'm sure he also had these terrible uncle jokes as well. No offense, Gabe Kaplan, this is not very enjoyable to watch.
Can anybody enlighten me about, like, the Sweathogs? Like, is it just like a group of like a name?
It's like the outcasts. It's the like lesser than kids at school. We would have been the Sweathogs.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like not the super smart kids, not the super rich kids, not the ones who do any clubs or play sports. They're just sort of, it's equal to like the burnouts, the punks.
It was just like a nickname that group of people got at that school. It wasn't like a thing everywhere. It's just very specific to this show.
Because the way that you guys were talking about it, like, oh, and it's about the Sweathogs. Like, I thought that maybe it was something bigger.
No, I think just like when we watch the episode and later on when you meet the other kids that they have the debate with and how they call them the turkeys, I feel like it's kind of in that same vein.
I'm trying to think of that scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off where she's going off everybody gets along with them. The freaks, the jocks, the weirdos. Just like lists off every group at the school.
I don't want to tell the whole joke, but basically to summarize, the idea was his uncle was in Miami and he forgot to check into a room on time and he was down there for a convention with his secretary. Because of that, there was only one room available. It was a double twin. So instead of him and his secretary having opposite rooms, they had to share one. While they're laying in bed, it's like drafty and she wants him to close the window. And he basically said something along the lines of, well, if you're chilly, would you like to pretend you're Mrs. Kotter for the night? And she's like, I'd love to. And he goes, go shut the window yourself then.
Proving that he's not cheating on his wife, but he's still a bad husband.
Well, yeah.
That was a funny joke.
Maybe the wife was closer to the window in their room. Who knows? But yeah, I thought it was a funny joke. And I'm not doing it justice summarizing it, but I also didn't want to take 3 minutes telling a joke. Now, I did get ahead in mentioning that this is something that they do kind of every episode. Not very different in a way than like, say, like a Jerry Seinfeld doing stand-up to start the episode. Kind of a routine thing that goes on. How do you feel about that being the way to intro a show?
I like it because you get to see him not in the class. And you get to see him with his wife, who becomes more of a fixture in the show, if I remember correctly. But it makes, I don't know, I like in these situations where like, sometimes in school shows, you never see the people outside of school. And it's a weird thing too, right? Like imagine, remember you saw your teachers outside in the real world, you'd always be like, what the fuck? They're doing stuff. Like, yeah, they're going to the grocery store, man. Like we all do that. But like seeing him at home with his wife, you're like, okay, he has like a normal life. He's not just at the school all the time. I think that's like a good separation.
Yeah, it's almost like a relaxing after dark type thing.
I think it works when you realize it's an established thing. After a while, like that's his thing. It was a little strange for a first time.
Yeah, like if you're watching for the first time, you're kind of like, what's this? But I'm sure if you're like an avid like fan of the show, every week you like look forward to that. Like, oh, what's the uncle joke going to be like?
Also, did anybody recognize the mom? Or the wife, rather?
Oh, yeah, she was Mr. Kotter's wife from Welcome Back, Kotter.
She's also the mom in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that. And she passed some years back, right?
I'm not sure if I didn't see if she was still alive or not, but I mean, this would have only been like, what is that, like 87? So only 10 years or so later.
I didn't even notice that. That's crazy. That's crazy. I didn't realize that.
Go from one funny husband to another. Although I would love to see a Rick Moranis TV show.
I know. I thought he was going to do that like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids show. Wasn't that going to be a thing?
The actual Honey, I Shrunk the Kids show didn't even have Rick Moranis in it. It was some other family. They were still the Zelinskis.
Was it a cartoon or a real show?
It was a real show.
Oh, I remember that. That was like mid-90s, like...
Yeah, it was a Saturday morning.
But when he came back into like acting, when Rick Moranis showed his face again a few years back, wasn't that the plan, was to do like a show?
I think so. And I thought that he was maybe going to do a cameo in Ghostbusters. Like, I think there was like a few things he was working on. And then some asshole punched him in the face. And if I ever meet that person, I will murder them.
After I bought a shirt that says Defend Rick Moranis with a gun on it. But anyways, yeah, from here we get into the intro. And it's one of those like very iconic theme songs. It's just various shots of Brooklyn. The show takes place in Brooklyn. And that's all we're seeing is just old kind of stock footage of Brooklyn in the 70s and the songs playing the whole time.
Graffitied trains. It's almost like a city version, like the opposite of how All in the Family is like the suburban streets of Queens. This is like the city parts of Brooklyn, but it's very similar.
She died in 2014, and she was also on MASH, which we covered.
Oh, yeah.
Who was she in MASH?
Mishmash.
She was damn you. I was going to say the same joke.
Question for you. Do we know who sang this theme song, or if this was a famous song or whatever? Because it's a pretty iconic song.
It's John Sebastian from The Lovin' Spoonful.
So he wrote the song for the show. The song ended up reaching the charts, like became like a number one on the charts. But the funny thing was, when he wrote the show was only going to be called Kotter. and he's like, couldn't think of anything to rhyme with it, and he was just struggling to write the song. So the Welcome Back thing was just the song he ended up writing, and it was more about like, what happens in the show and like just kind of the overall theme, because we don't see it in this episode, but the idea of the show is Gabe Kotter was a Sweathog, went on to go to college, got his teaching degree, and then went back to the school he went to when he was younger, and now is a teacher.
Yeah, wasn't he the founding member of the Sweathog?
He was one of the original class of Sweathogs. So the song is Welcome Back because of that, and then the creators of the show liked it so much that they changed the name of the show to Welcome Back Kotter to fit the song.
I won't lie, I don't like this theme song.
What?
This is one of those things that, like, we've talked about in other shows where it's like a boring, slow theme song, and it makes me want to shut the show off.
It's so feel good to me. Like, it's not even from our era, but I have a nostalgia to it because we watched it as kids. And like, it's just such a feel good song. I really like this song a lot.
Yeah, it instantly made me feel good and nostalgic when I watched it.
Yeah, I've always liked this song. I feel like it reminds me of like Taxi or something too, like that theme song where it's like with Angela, the song. You're like, maybe necessarily not the most like, I'm not gonna put this on a playlist or something, but when I hear it, I smile.
I might actually put this on a playlist. Why don't we have like a Spotify playlist that people can download?
Of just theme songs? Put one together.
Yeah, we can just do that.
We should just do that.
That said, though, as somebody who loves television and loves sitcoms, I don't know if I could listen to like an hour and a half of just sitcom songs.
I don't think I would ever just put a sitcom song on. Like, I don't care how much I like it. Like, all really liking a TV sitcom intro would do for me is not skipping it on Hulu. I would never just be like, oh, I'm going to throw this song on.
But like I said, this song reached like #1 on the charts, and we've had other songs like Cheers and stuff that were like commercially successful songs that were created for shows.
I could do it with all the Disney afternoon shows. I could listen to them all.
Gordo, that was you're thinking of the Monster Mash.
I am. No, I was thinking of Suicide is Painless, which is also a very
upbeat, fun song.
An upbeat, jaunty tune.
Has that same feel-good vibe that Welcome Back Kotter has.
Makes me nostalgic still.
And then it was also the sampled version for the Mace song for Welcome Back Kotter. If you guys remember that Welcome Back song.
I do not.
Mace Windu?
No, Mace of the Puff Daddy era. So now we get into the actual episode itself, and we see all the Sweathogs near Kotter's desk, and they had just painted this giant mural behind his desk, and it's like the history of the Sweathogs. And he comes in and doesn't see it at first, and everyone's acting appropriately, which is abnormal for them. So when he first says good morning to everybody, they say, good morning, Mr. Kotter. We're all in our places with bright, shiny faces. And he's like, excuse me, where's my class? And turns around and sees the mural and goes, oh, there they are.
I like that. That told you everything that you needed to know.
You see a lot about the hijinks. Even before he walks in, too, when they're just discussing, like, what do you guys think of the mural? And they're like kind of, talking about it like they're art critics.
I mean, this episode does work as a first episode. If this was the pilot, I can see being like, within 5 minutes, you understand what's going on.
We're not to believe that this is the first day of school, correct?
No, I don't think so. It looks like they all have a rapport with each other.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, because he knows their names and everything.
Well, I mean, other teachers at our school knew us because we were such great children.
We were Sweathogs.
We were Sweathogs.
When Kotter finally notices the mural and he's like, what's this? It's like, oh, it's a present for you. And they come to realize that it's, like I said before, it's the history of the Sweathogs. And because, as I mentioned before, Gabe Kotter was one of the original Sweathogs from like 10 years prior. It starts with like their class, and he's kind of going through the timeline, and it shows them and him like hitting at the principal with a spitball. And then it kind of goes into him being on a date at Coney Island, and then him like taking the date like onto a blanket at the beach. And I was kind of like, well, when did he share these details? Because then it sounds like some stuff happened with him and the girl, and I don't know why that made it into the mural.
Yeah, he definitely told those kids about like the time he fucked some girl under the boardwalk at one point. Also, I don't think he looks particularly old in this, but it is wild to be like, I think every one of us looks younger than Gabe Kaplan looks right here, and he's 30.
Oh, he was 30 for this episode when it came out?
Yeah, it's just crazy how different people looked 40 years ago.
It's just an anomaly. Like, it's... Yeah. We've discussed this ad nauseum, right? Like, it's just the style, the hair, honestly, part of it is the like their line of work too. They all have like they're in the middle of their careers at 30, right? Which just isn't the case most of the time nowadays. So it's just it's all about looks and, you know, just your perception of the person because of
Well,
where
he has
they
like the
are.
big mustache and the fro, and that's going to age him up a little bit because he's 30, but some of those Sweathogs are like 23, 24. All these guys that are playing teenagers and high school kids. I believe the youngest was Travolta, and he was like 20 at the time.
Yeah, they're very obviously not 16.
So he's not
17.
even, he's not even that far. Like, he's supposed to play about 10 years older than him, but in reality, he's probably 5-6 years older than most of them.
I think there's something to say for like when everybody smoked in every building everywhere and you were just constantly inhaling smoke. And I say that as somebody who's smoked, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, like, when every restaurant, every bar, every house you went into, sometimes I see like Christmas pictures from like 1991 or whatever, and there's just like a haze of cigarette smoke in the living room with everybody. You're like, oh yeah, there were just ashtrays for people. Even if you didn't smoke, people smoked in your house. I think being around all that all the time definitely aged you more. And now we don't really get that. But maybe all the vaping is going to make people age like a cotton candy.
If you're my brother, nougat.
He smokes nougat?
Dude loves a good tiramisu.
As he's still going along the mural and going through the story, they all start singing in unison, like pomp and circumstance, like going through it because it sounds like a speech. But then he starts going, because he's getting back into now that he's back in the class. He's like, well, here I am, coming back to my old school to teach these brand new group of Sweathogs. And here's that group painting this mural on the wall. And this is the part I like the best. The same group going into the closet, getting mops, sponges, soap, and water, and cleaning all this junk off the wall. And they're singing along because, he kind of, I'm not vocalizing it properly in a way that, this is the turn where it sounds like he's telling a story, but he's really just telling them to clean up.
This episode in itself is very sing-songy. Like, there's a lot of singing, there's a lot of vocalizing. At one
He
point,
sings a lot, yeah.
Gabe Kaplan just kind of does a rap.
I think he should have kept it and showed that they care and they put in an effort. And that's their whole thing is they don't try.
Yeah, but part of it was him like hitting the principal with a spitball. So you'd probably have to edit that part.
Well, I don't know if I don't think it was photorealistic enough for the principal to walk in and be like, "Is that me getting hit with a spitball?"
Yeah. I guess to paint a picture to the listener, yeah, it was very far from like legitimate street art.
Oh, Banksy didn't do that?
I didn't look it, no.
Banksy, who I know what that is now, thanks to S1E1.
Oh, I forgot you didn't know who Banksy was. That's dating ourselves. That's early episodes.
Well, now that we're in the hundreds.
So the Sweathogs tell him that they're going to clean it up. And then when they all walk up to him, the four main Sweathogs, they say, well, do you want us to take care of your jacket too? He's like, what about my jacket? It's like, well, we use the extra paint to paint the top of your desk. And he pulls up his arms and he's like, oh, boy. And then all four of them who's put their hands on the desk to tell him lift their hands and are also covered in paint. And that's
I love
the gag.
that they all forgot.
Yeah.
Got it too.
Yeah, that was good.
That when it first happened, they said it, and I was like, he wouldn't notice that they painted his desk. I have a white desk right now. If I walked in and all of a sudden it was like mustard yellow, I would know something was wrong. But then my anger at it went away when they all put their hands on it, and I was like, oh, lol, I'm okay now. I don't mind anymore.
So the following scene is when we see Kotter sitting in the teacher's lounge and he's just having lunch, and that's when the other teacher, Alex, heads in. As we said, Alex is a known actor, which is like, well, nowadays, he wasn't really doing much then, right? He was super young.
This is one of his first things, yeah. So he's just a working actor who got a walk on an episode for one. He only just did this one episode, so he wasn't like a recurring character.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's the drama teacher and also the debate teacher. And he's going over one of the plays that he's doing, or it's weird. He's having dialogue with Kotter. And when Kotter says something, he's like, wait a minute, say it again. And he's like working on his delivery and how he's saying it. It was kind of weird. It's funny, but it was weird because it's not like he was auditioning for anything. So, but we're getting a vibe for this kind of teacher. And Kotter very openly doesn't like him and pretty much says like, can you please get away from me?
Yeah, they have kind of a contentious, like not even like we work together, I tolerate this person. He's kind of outright shitty to him.
It's, yeah, pretty hostile.
Because he tells him like, I don't know how much longer I can hold on with you in this room. And he's like, oh, well, the snappy retort. He's like, no, it's not snappy. It's just, I can't tolerate you.
What I thought was weird in this scene, they have the coffee pot warmer, and it's filled with just water, and they're both having tea, which I just thought was an interesting choice, right? Usually you see teachers midday, everyone's pouring cups of coffee, and they went with tea, which I feel like is a very specific choice.
Well, that's why they're not called coffchers.
He's like the thespian, though, like the proper.
But Gabe's having tea, too. If it was just that guy, it would be the Kevin from The Office you would joke, which I would like totally get, right? But Gabe's having it too.
If you remember in middle school, we had a history teacher who every day had a microwave in his classroom, would just microwave water and make tea. I always thought it was super strange because he would do this while teaching us. Like, you have breaks during the day, go have your tea then. I don't understand why you're making a cup of tea in the middle of class right now.
I always hated that because we would get in trouble for having anything but water. I'm like, I don't care that you're a teacher, but if I want to have a coffee right now, I would get yelled at.
Yeah.
Especially when most of our teachers had other things in their tea and coffee.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I was going to say, Nick, was that the same guy that we dumped tea in his tea and chalk in his tea?
We'll show him. How about some extra strong tea?
No, this was a middle school teacher.
Yeah, no. That was a middle school.
I don't recall putting chalk in anybody's tea.
Oh, I definitely did.
That makes sense.
Well, that's a real
yeah.
piece of shit thing to do.
Yeah, I hope that was very hot tea. I don't know if chalk would dissolve.
It didn't matter. He would get up. You guys definitely know him. He was from Ireland.
Yeah, no, not him.
Okay.
Rest
He
in
would
peace.
he would get up, turn his back around, or he'd leave the classroom, and I'd get up and I'd take tea. I'd take like chalk from the chalkboard, like a whole fucking thing, and I'd just go bloop right into, not because he always had like a travel mug that had just the right size hole for a piece of chalk to go through, and I'd dump it in, and then he'd get about halfway through, and
You're a bad man.
You're a real piece of shit.
he'd start going ballistic on us.
Yeah, as he should, because that's like poisoning a person. That's not okay. That's not like an all right thing to do.
I don't think chalk's gonna kill anyone.
It definitely made him stronger.
Who do you think would win the biggest shithead in our youth award amongst us?
I think I got accused of it, but I don't know if I was.
I think it's a tie. It's gonna end up being a tie between Gordo and Ferg. I think because I'm just rifling through my memories right now.
Gordo's done way worse than me.
I don't know, man.
No.
The whole steak and cheese thing was pretty
I'm
bad.
sorry, I didn't throw. All right, that same person, Gordo threw his shoes in the ocean. His only shoes.
Listen, to be fair,
To be fair, I think Ferg wins this one. Yeah, you did a shithead thing by the steak and cheese, but Gordo throwing his only shoes in the lake.
And wait, Gordo was part of this. Gordo was part of the steak and cheese thing too, so he's in that.
No names. No names.
No names.
So anyway, if you want the story, there was this kid that used to sit alone at the lunch thing, and sometimes he'd play chess with this other kid. So Gordo had a steak and cheese that was just loaded with ketchup for some reason, like covered in ketchup.
Which is an awful way to have a steak and cheese, by the way.
I had Gordo go over and take their king. So the kid stood up, and then I put the steak and cheese on the kid's stool. But he sat back down in his khakis. It got all over his ass.
And of course he was wearing khakis, right? Like, you can't, why'd it have to be khakis that day?
I just remember being, I mean, how old are you? Like, we're like 12, 13 years old. Even
Yeah,
then,
that's
I was
old.
like, wow, what a shitty thing to do to somebody. Like, I couldn't even see the humor in it. I just felt bad.
Yeah,
for
just
this
so it's
kid.
clear to people listening who are like, this isn't funny, this is really mean. We agree. Just for the record.
the best part about the whole thing is that the kid stood up, turned around, and the steak and cheese plopped out of his butt. And it made it look like,
Bad people.
it made it look like he pooped in front of the whole class.
In all fairness, the first day I met him, I tried to be nice, and he would not tell me his first name. So he made an enemy that day and a nickname.
And it stuck.
Maybe he was like, I don't want to talk to this kid. He's clearly a piece of shit.
I'm sorry, you could all act all high and mighty, but you all laughed your ass off, and you still laugh to this day about it.
Well, moral of the story is, later on, from what I hear, he moved kind of far away after we were all friends and became a male exotic dancer and could do so because he could hang dong. So he beat everybody in the end.
Yeah, but does he have a podcast?
Yeah, true.
He probably has a podcast called, like, My Giant Cock and Those Dickheads I Went to School With 25 years ago. And I'm sure he's sponsored. I'm sure he's selling so much mushroom water on his podcast.
In his episode, he's like, and I bet Ferg thought he was the biggest dick that day. So to go way back to the Kotter and Alex in the teacher's lounge, they're talking about their students, and there's a moment where Alex calls, what's it, Alex Holmes? Mr. Holmes?
Mr. Wells.
Mr. Wells, I'm sorry. So he refers to the students as Sweathogs, And Kotter kind of defends him. He's like, oh, wait, not defends him, but defends the kids. He's like, well, you can't call them Sweathogs. Like, I can call them Sweathogs, and they can call themselves Sweathogs within the classroom, but outside of it, you can't say that.
This kind of threw me off because it wasn't like he was saying something bad. You know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of thing that, like, you would say over, like, if a group of people in a certain group called themselves, like, an epithet that reflected back on their race or, like, sexuality or something, and they said that. You can't say that about them, but they can say it about themselves, sort of thing. But, like, Sweathogs means nothing. It's not that offensive.
No, but again, it's context, right? I believe Aziz Ansari had a bit about this years ago. It's like, if you say anything under the right context, it will come off the wrong way.
Yeah, like they're Sweathogs because they're failures.
Yeah, and if you say it with mean intention, then yeah. And that's when he says, like, no enlightened educator would ever call a child a sweathog. And that's when the principal enters and goes, Kotter, do you know what your sweathogs have done now? And apparently, their hijinks are a little bit more lighthearted than ours. So what they did was they switched the men's room and women's room signs in the bathrooms at the school. So the principal had walked into the women's room by accident and startled one of the poor teachers.
I'm sorry, you say more lighthearted? That's not more lighthearted. They made a sex offender that day.
Yeah, that's hardcore. But also, like, you walk into a school, if you're like, oh, this woman's room all of a sudden has urinals in it. Like, you'd know right away you were in the boys' room.
Well, yeah, so I don't think the intention is for it to be flipped forever. It's just these isolated moments where someone walks in on somebody and, you know, like what happened.
Maybe because poor Mrs. Fishbach or whatever her name was, maybe she was chomping down on some water cookies.
Fishcock.
She didn't want to get caught.
I don't think it was Fishcock. Fishbeck.
See, if they weren't Sweathogs and they were Fishcocks, then I would say you can't call them Fishcocks.
Funny, you can hear that name and just picture what that teacher looks like.
And there's a point here where, again, Kotter's defending his kids, and he gets into this point where he says, like, I'm sure my students can out-debate your students, because he actually teaches the legit debate team. He's like, what? No, absolutely not. Are you challenging my students to a debate? And Kotter's like, yeah, all right. Like, you know, whatever, we'll set it up. And the principal was, like, adamantly against it at first, but I didn't understand why.
Did we have a debate team when we were in high school?
Not that I know
I was
of.
wondering that too. I don't think we did, but having said that, I would have been so far away from knowing whether or not we had a debate team.
That's true.
I'm not sure I would have tracked one if there was one.
We did.
Oh, did we? Tell us about it.
Shut up. I'm debate man.
Dr. John over here.
No, we did. We had the mass debate team.
Boo.
So anyways, now that they've established that they're going to have this debate now between the two teacher students, there's this moment where, like I said, the principal didn't want them to have it, which I don't quite understand why, but he's telling them, don't worry, Mr. Woodman. And now Kotter's flipping it on him, and he's going, oh, say that again. Say it the way you said it before. And, like, he grabs his mouth, and he's, like having a mouth in a certain way to, like, change his delivery, and he's saying it over and over. It's like, beautiful, terrific, say it again. Don't worry, Mr. Woodman. And he's moving his arms and, like, playing around him like he's a puppet. And it was just like, how is he falling for this? Like, he's clearly being made to look like a fool, but he's not catching on.
That's what happens when you're an ascot, I think.
Yeah, his ascot was a little too tight.
You think Mr. Woodman didn't want the thing because deep down he likes the Sweathogs and he didn't want to see them get embarrassed?
No, that's not the vibe I get from him.
Ferg, do you think he's the Fivish Finkel of this faculty?
If only.
R.I.P.
So now the next scene we see the classroom again, and the Sweathogs are finishing cleaning up. And they've, like, the wall's back to normal, everything's back to before the mural was painted. And they're like, all right, we're good enough. And Kotter heads in, and he's like, yeah, see, Mr. Kotter, it came right off. And now he's like, okay, now that the history of the Sweathogs has been removed, I wonder if you guys can, you know, express yourselves in another way, like in words. And Epstein's like, hey, words are great, Mr. Kotter. You know, I use them all the time. As a matter of fact, I just use words to tell you that I use words.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like these.
That one missed.
Unpopular opinion, but everyone loved, like, the other Sweathogs. When I was younger, for some reason, Juan Epstein was my favorite Sweathog. I used to love that he always had the notes signed Epstein's mom, and I was waiting for it in this episode. It didn't happen. I was so let down.
There are a couple telltale things from the show, like, that if you know the show's history, that they don't do in this episode. And one's coming up in a second where Vinnie Barbarino says his famous line, but he doesn't say it the way he's famous for saying it.
Oh, he says garden hose. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get into it in a second. I'll say this. In the pilot episode, which was filmed before it, he says it the other way.
Yeah, he says a normal in the pilot, which we didn't see.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later on, but that was one thing that, to go back though, the pilot versus this, without getting a deep dive of that, here we're meeting the Sweathogs, but we're learning about all the kids through their actions, but we're not getting a lot of backstory on them. We're just kind of being introduced to everybody.
I was also let down that there was no Freddie Boom Boom Washington. Hi there.
Yeah. You know what's so stupid? Do you guys remember Viva Variety?
Yep.
Yeah.
I loved Viva Variety.
At Comedy Central. One thing I always remember is one of the characters that Michael Ian Black was doing was talking about going to meet the president, Freddie Boom Boom Washington. And for some reason, whenever I think of him, it was either him or, God, the other guy from that show, from Reno 911, everything else. But it was one of the guys on that giving a big impassioned speech about meeting the American president, Freddie Boom Boom Washington. And I think about that all the time.
Johnny Blue Jeans.
Viva Variety!
I don't know how to quite tackle like describing every character. I guess we'll just have to find moments where they're being discussed in the show. So Epstein is the tougher of the ones. You usually see him in like a sleeveless denim.
Yeah, he's voted most likely to take a life.
To go through them all, I guess then, we have the 4 main Sweathogs. And Horshack, he's the goofy one of the group.
He's the Screech.
Yes. He was the Screech before Screech, and then him and Screech had celebrity boxing.
He had a boxing fight that was very impressive.
Screech beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, it was very sad.
And sadly, R.I.P. to both of them.
Yeah,
Right.
Epstein and Horshack are both not with us anymore.
Oh, I also meant, and Dustin Diamond.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant the two, Epstein. John Travolta plays Vinnie Barbarino. He was like the leader of the pack, kind of the leader of the Sweathogs. I don't know how you describe him other than that, like just kind of the one that they all look up to a bit.
The Danny Zuko, if you will.
Yeah, he's a ringleader of the crew. And then Freddie Boom Boom Washington. The reason Boston almost didn't play it because there was one black Sweathog and they didn't know how people were going to take it. He was like very like smooth, very funny guy. I'm trying to think of like how to best describe Freddie Boom Boom Washington's character the best, but
He's kind of like the clever one.
he's got like the most charisma, I think, out of all.
Yeah.
Although him
Yeah.
and Barbarino are probably like 1A, 1B with that. But yeah, in this whole thing about the words and using words, this is when he tells them like, hey, I'm thinking about setting up a debate team. He's trying to get them all involved and he's like snapping his fingers and like singing about how he wants to have a debate team.
This is like the proto-rap thing that feels like it's part of Stomp or something.
No, this made me really laugh, and I don't know why. I felt stupid because I didn't even know why I was laughing. The little walk with his hands that he was doing.
As he's getting to the song and really getting into it, yeah, there's the moment where he like raises his hands and he's walking through the crowd and like he's really, really into it. There's a point I think towards the end he's like starts with a D, and I think at some point towards the end, something about ding-a-ling. It was the song gets a little off the rails towards the end, but he's getting people a little excited. And he said, just think of a debate as sort of a rumble with words. And that's when Barbarino goes, you mean like up your nose with a garden hose? And not garden hose typically.
Yeah, typically it's rubber hose. Jay definitely just picked this episode so he could do John Travolta impressions
It's
the
literally
entire
just thinking
fucking
that as you said it.
time.
Yeah.
You're not going to believe this.
Sandy, come back.
Jay, that's a great John Travolta impression that you're doing. How's your Bobcat Goldthwait impression coming?
Listen, my John Travolta's not that good. And that's you can only imagine how bad the other one is if I'm comfortable doing this one.
If you want Bobcat, you're just gonna think of John Travolta getting hit by a bird in Wild Hogs, and that's basically the voice.
One of the greatest moments in cinematic history.
All right, Wild Hog's definitely on the potential watch-along list for movies.
But anyways, to go back to that line, the up your nose with a rubber hose, and in this case, garden hose, that comes from Gabe Kaplan's comedy. It's only in that it was up your hole with the mellow roll, and they wanted to soften it a little bit and nothing up the hole, so they switched it to the nose. But that comes straight out of his comedy.
What is a melon roll?
Mellow roll.
What the hell is that?
Like the candy?
I don't know.
It's a Rolo. Maybe he
Yeah.
means a tube of Rolos, which I believe have nougat in them.
No, they
Vape
have
that.
caramel in them.
No,
Oh,
they're
it's
all
caramel.
caramel.
Well, fuck me then. I haven't had a Rolo in a long time. But that was the TV show's big hook, though, right? Like you would see, like there were T-shirts of him that said "Up your nose" with a rubber
That
hose
became
and-
like a big cultural
And
thing.
off
for him.
my case toilet face
Yes.
Yep.
was the other one.
Which he does differently in this episode, but says in the pilot the right way.
Very strange. This show has a lot of weird rhyming.
I don't remember what he says in this one, but I do remember him saying it correctly in the pilot.
Why was there so much rhyming? I
Yeah,
meant
there's
to
a lot
bring
of
that up.
rhyming.
Like Mr. Kotter does it. Everybody's doing it. I don't understand the rhyming.
Because it's the 70s, man. Everyone talked in rhyme.
Well, that was even like when we talk about the actual song. You know, the guy who wrote the song's like, I can't rhyme much with Kotter. He's like, I'm just going to have to go off the rails here and make something different.
Otter. Here are some words that rhyme with Corey. Allegory.
What a fun song. But yeah,
Pot?
so you say hot rhymes with Kotter?
Pot.
Pot?
It's still
Pot.
doesn't
Kotter
rhyme.
and pot don't rhyme.
Do you mean Potter?
Sure.
That's not how rhymes work. It's not the front part.
Slaughter?
Did we just uncover another very basic thing Gordo should
Yeah, Gordo
know,
doesn't
but
know how to rhyme.
You're a musician and you don't know how to rhyme.
I also don't know how to play an instrument too, so let's be fair.
Remember when Gordo played Wonderwall and he couldn't get out of the chorus? Like he just kept redoing. He couldn't figure out where it ended. He sang the chorus to Wonderwall like 7 times while playing it live.
I don't remember the song being so long.
It was at his old apartment. He played for like it was a bunch of people there. I'll watch.
Oh, we did a show there, right, Gordo?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
say he's still there playing it.
Yeah, we all played it. And I believe you covered one of our friends' songs.
I did.
And I believe you did it, and it really pissed him off.
Well, I took his song so he couldn't play it.
Yeah.
I made us sing along.
But it was an original song.
Mm-hmm.
Well, real dick move, Joe. You win the dick bit contest.
Yeah, I know,
And then
Joe.
I made him sit in a steak and cheese sandwich. I apologize.
I believe that's where the photo of me with the cowboy hat, very drunk, playing guitar comes out. I look like a cowboy.
You gotta be specific. You've been a cowboy a lot.
Yeah, I remember being at that apartment one time where you made us take a picture of you with all that cowboy stuff so that you could put it onto Craigslist, maybe? Trying to get people to call for some sort of a date or something. And we were all just like, Gordon, no one's going to call you. And you're like, yeah, they totally will. And like 4 hours, 5 hours later, everyone drinking is like, hey, Gordon, did the phone ring yet? It's like, no, nobody called.
Trying to get me a thoroughbred. Call me for out calls.
I was trying to thoroughbred myself, if you know what I mean.
Should have went with thoroughbreed.
Thoroughbreed. You know what I meant.
But anyways, Kotter's trying to get them to get into this debate thing and get him excited. And they're not really having it. He just kind of plays that reverse psychology. It's like, oh, I guess you're all too chicken to mix it up at Mr. Wells' debating class. And that's what we hear. You mean those turkeys? We're not afraid of them. And now he's like getting everyone kind of into the idea of it. And that's when he's like, okay, well, let's start getting some volunteers, because they're saying like, we'll stuff them. We'll fricassee them. Like all these things. Kotter tells Horshack to get up and let's start testing the debate, because like, all right, well, what's the topic? And they decide on, what was it? Is it anger in general? Was it
Aggression.
Aggression. And it was testing out the theory of aggression and why it's needed versus why it's not needed. And Horshack gets up there and he is completely lost. And he's just basically just saying the same things over and over again, trying to just like wait out the clock so he can get off being on the stage.
And consistently saying, axe you.
Yes, I noticed that too.
I like that he's like the nerdy one, but he's not the smart nerd, which is like the stereotype for all these shows. The one smart member.
Right. They don't have the one smart member. But in any event, when he's done rambling on for a couple minutes with that nonsense, he still has all his friends behind him, so they're all cheering him on, and he sits down. So now it's Epstein's turn to go up, and he tells him that it's time to either take the rebuttal or give him the no argument. And he goes, sure, no argument.
I did like that.
It was funny. It was the idea of no, I agree, aggression's the way to go.
I mean, I knew that's what was going to happen, but it was still funny at least.
And then he's like, no, you have to prove that you don't need aggression. So that's when he walks up to the desk of Horshack, and he's like, hey, Arnold, people don't need to be aggressive, do they? Obviously being very aggressive towards him. And he's like, no, they don't. I lied. I swear I lied. People don't need to be aggressive. And Epstein walks to Kotter's desk. Kotter, look, I'm really good at this rebutting stuff, you know?
This is the Jay fucking impression podcast this week.
I wouldn't say those are strong impressions, but there's the inflections of how they speak are so strong. You kind of say it a little bit like them.
No, you could go way hard. I mean, like, if you were doing an impression of Horshack, you could go way harder.
You go like, ooh, Mr. Kotter.
Ooh.
So now everybody's on board, and, they're all kind of singing along, and they're ready for this debate now. So the next scene, we have Principal Woodman in the room with Kotter, and they're getting ready to get the debate set up. And Kotter asks him if he's ready for the big debate. He's like, I am ready, Kotter, to see you make a complete and utter fool of yourself. And then Kotter just goes like, and like makes a funny face and like wiggles his face around for a minute. And
It went on for way too long, that face,
Yeah.
if you ask me.
Yeah, it was a bit long on the.
I was like, how's
the
that?
joke.
I was surprised he, like, the theory of it, like, I understand the backstory, but for him to be that, you need to be like a little afraid of your boss in these types of shows, right? And he clearly doesn't care at all and will say whatever he wants.
Once a sweat hog, always a sweat hog.
Yeah. Then he's like, that's exactly how I would expect you to act from a man who expects his Sweathogs to out-debate the debate team. He's like, well, let me run down now and get those turkeys. I mean the debate class.
I definitely laughed pretty hard when he called them turkeys.
And he's trying to, like, Kotter's still trying to defend his kids. Like, Mr. Woodman, you won't even recognize my kids. I told him to make sure that they behave like ladies and gentlemen and told them to dress dignified. And you see them all, like, march in, like, in a weird, like one hand in front of the other, like, just, like, they're connected.
Yeah, they're doing like a weird chorus line thing.
It's
or
like in a
something.
work-safe elephant walk. And they all have costumes on. And the principal just goes, they're not people, Kotter.
I do like having the like stiff authority figure in the show. I think that definitely helps. You need to have that foil.
And when Kotter's like, what the fuck's going on? Doesn't say fuck, but essentially, it's like, don't worry, this is part of our plan. Like the whole outfit and everything that they're doing. And Barbarino's like, look, you want me to remove my suspenders? I'll remove the suspenders. There ain't much dignity in a pair of pants dropping on the floor.
I wonder if that's what he said to
Hey.
that masseuse that time.
And they're going over what everyone's wearing. They all kind of have like something that needs to be discussed on. And Horshack has a top hat on. He's like, what about my top hat? That's real dignified. Like, well, where'd you get it? I got it from Murray. He's like, who's Murray? He's like, Murray the horse. And he puts his fingers through the ear holes that are in the top hat. That
He stole a handsome cab horse's hat. Like, did he just grab it and run?
Yeah, because I would assume that would be the horse that's like a horse and carriage walking you around like Central Park, right?
Yeah.
That's the only time I could envision the horse having a top hat on. And then he talks to Washington, Freddie Boom Boom, about his coat. He tells him that coat looks like it comes at a $95 funeral. He's like, this coat was worn at the famous Lincoln Douglas debate. He's like, what? He's like, yeah, I wore the coat when my father Lincoln was beating the daylights out of my brother Douglas.
That was a pretty good joke.
Funny joke, but again, it's like one of the jokes that you couldn't say it now because
Yeah,
like the
you
thought
can't
like
make
the
it,
father
like-
just beating the kid's brother is like not something that would fly in today's world joke wise.
But also like a rare moment of like that's something they would have had to have learned in school. Like you don't have a lot of curriculum stuff or that anything seems to be retained from them, but somehow he retained Lincoln Douglas.
And then when Epstein gets up, he's like he's dressed up like some weird like I don't know. It's like he has like a pirate sword and a bandana around his like fro, and then his shirt's tied up like around his like it's not like a belly shirt, but it's tied up high. And he said that that's how his grandmother dressed in like when she fought on San Juan Hill for the Puerto Rican Jews.
And that she looked like Teddy Roosevelt because she
Yeah.
had mustache and sideburns.
I was thinking the other Roosevelt. I thought he just said Roosevelt.
No, he said Teddy.
Oh, I didn't catch that part.
If it was like Franklin, it would be like the mother would be in like a wheelchair or something, right? That'd be like the only thing you could distinguish her.
Be tough to go up San Juan Hill in a wheelchair.
She was more effective when she had to get down the hill to.
The cavalry charged down there.
You guys should grow up making fun of the disabled like that. You need
Yeah.
to grow up like me.
This is like the line that I was most shocked by because this is when Kotter was like, Epstein, close your mouth and sit on your sword. And everyone's like, ooh.
Well, this is where he keeps starts with the weird sexual stuff with Rosie too, though.
I was gonna say I don't know if that was intended to be, but I took it that way.
I feel like the first time the crowd took it sexual, but I don't know if it was intended in writing to be that way.
I think it was because they like triple down on it.
Yeah, because Kotter, like Gabe Kaplan, I was going to say Kapler. Kaplan, when he acts, and this happens in this episode, and you can see it actually, Ferg will tell you too, if you watch the pilot episode, he like smirks a lot. Like there's a lot of, you can tell they don't do a lot of takes, and he cracks himself up sometimes. But yeah, the girl, Rosalie, she gets up and she's dressed up like a cheerleader, and she just starts doing like a really basic cheer, like, give me an S, give me a W, give me an E-A-T. And he goes, give it to me later, okay? And like pushes her off, but the way he says it, everyone's like, wait, what? Like,
Well, she like dances and backs her ass into his crotch.
and I think that's why it was perceived that way, but maybe wasn't intended. It was like just the perfect storm caused it to happen that
was
way.
just poor blocking on the stage.
Yeah.
And Rosie Hotsy Totsy is in Police Academy 3 with Bobcat Goldthwait. So, Jay, we once again ask you, how is your impression coming?
It's twice in one episode. It's not great, and I'm gonna have to figure it out on vacation, I guess, because next time we record, we're doing our 2-year anniversary.
I always thought it was strange. There's always a female, like this female Sweathogs, but they don't, like, you know her name from looking it up, but they don't ever introduce themselves.
No, he calls her by name once here, but I feel like
No, she's a character in the show.
No, I'm saying that there's always like
Right.
either her or there's another one too, even in the pilot, but they don't get, like, they get lines and everything, but they don't get a description. They don't introduce themselves. They don't do
Yeah.
anything like that.
she got a couple lines throughout this episode in a way that I felt like they probably intended for her to maybe be the female Sweathog, like, of the
Yeah.
gang, and they just kind of didn't go that way. Because she did. She didn't get as much spotlight as the 4 guys, but after that, she had a few lines throughout the episode. She, like, if it wasn't one of them, it was her speaking, and really nobody else in the classroom.
But Jay, correct me if I'm wrong. In the pilot one, the female Sweathog that shows up at the apartment in that episode, that's not her, right? That's a different female Sweathog.
I don't recall.
I thought it was a different one.
That girl I was, like, assuming was, like, Vinny's girl or something, the way she was, like, with him when that happened, but I can't remember. I'd have to look that up. So now as they're talking, someone runs into the room and goes, "The turkeys are coming, the turkeys are coming." And I don't know why, but when I saw the kid, I thought he looked like Sherry O'Terry. I don't know why, which is really weird to me.
Could have been worse. He could have looked like Rachel Dratch.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Rachel Dratch.
But when they go in, they're all heading in with the principal, and Woodman goes, "Good morning, Sweathogs, and welcome to your Waterloo." It's like, "Oh, way to take sides, Mr. Woodman." And Wells is quick to note how they're all dressed a little foolish. He goes, "What is this, a costume party? Tacky, tacky, tacky." I'm like, "Oh, is that what you think, Mr. Wells?" And they're like, "These are costumes from your last play."
I love it. It's psychological warfare.
It was.
Those
like,
Sweathogs.
when they came in, they're like, "Oh, this is all part of our intricate plan." Like, it was. And that's the thing about these guys. They're not great students, but it doesn't mean they're dumb.
They're street smart.
Yeah, and maybe that's the same, we just said earlier that maybe we were the Sweathogs too, and I do think that we kind of fell into that same type of category.
Correct if I'm wrong here, though. That means they went and raided James Wood's closet to get his clothes and costumes to psych him out, but Horshack still stole a hat from a horse for no reason.
He borrowed it.
Well, isn't that why he's called Horshack?
Okay, I'm going to give you that one.
I would have liked to have seen that scene. Come here, Morty.
Isn't that why it's called Horse Hat?
Murray, I swear I'll bring it back to you later on. The debate's about to start, and that we find out that the subject is the same one that they were working on earlier in the class, and that it's that humans are naturally aggressive. And it starts with the girl gets back up and she goes to do her cheer again. And once again, though, it's the give me a S, give me a W, and the give it to me later again. I felt like it was weird to go right back to that so soon because it had just happened 30 seconds earlier.
Agreed, yeah.
And even weirder, they go back to it again.
Yeah, but it works.
Yeah.
Like if they cut the middle one out, the late one would work better.
It works better as a callback if they didn't do this one, yeah.
Yeah. And you have the turkeys all get up and they're about to start doing their debate. Well, they have to do their reference checks first. I don't know how debates actually work, but apparently the way this happens is you stand up and you got to go over your cited materials and then the debate begins. So this girl gets up and she's reading over everything that it's from, like the New York Times and every time she would say something, one of the other 2 guys would go, check, study of the Arctic Eskimos, check. And like, they're going through the list. This girl has the thickest accent on earth.
Yeah, it's quite the accent.
It's that real, like, New York, like, exaggerated, I'm trying to think, who's the rat that Rizzo ends up with? Like, the female rat.
I don't know her name.
Sounds like just like her.
I was going to say Janine from the animated version of Ghostbusters.
Oh, okay, yeah. In that vein, too, yeah.
Like Natasha Lyonne, when she, like, puts the accent on hard.
Yeah.
And then once they do this checking, it's time for the Sweathogs to do theirs, and it's like they don't have anything ready. They didn't know that they had to have, like, cited material. They were going to wing it. So now Epstein and Freddie are whispering in Barbarino's ears, and he stands up and he just starts going over all his research stuff. And he goes like, "The last words of Jack the Ripper. I never met a person I didn't want to kill." And he got check. Attila Hunt speech to the troops. Trample everyone in sight. Check. My father to my mother. Now you hit him, Margie. My arm is tired.
That's very Bender-esque almost.
I liked it. Was the first time that I think it was Freddie Washington who did the check in because they were just following what they were doing. I thought that was really funny. I thought that whole little back and forth was good.
This was my favorite part of the episode.
Also, the female rat is Yolanda. I looked it up and I'm mad that I forgot.
Woodman goes, "Oh, before we get started, we need a timekeeper." And this is the first time we get the Horseshack, ooh, 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 which is like a very iconic thing from the show if you watch it.
Now, do you guys think that we'd make a great debate team?
Actually,
I do. Are you in the chats? Are you in the chats where Ferg and Jay just will go at each other for hours and I just leave? I can't even read them anymore.
Yeah, but those eventually devolved to, you're fucking stupid.
You're not wrong. It legitimately devolves into you two just calling each other names. People who've known each other since literally the week they were born, just telling each other they're fucking stupid because no one can win with you two.
In school, I always felt like the only thing I had going for me because I didn't do homework was that I was quick on my toes so I could talk. And I remember when we were in high school, we did the solar power car thing. So it was
My team won.
So what happened was it was like all throughout the grade. It wasn't even just within your class. And you got to make teams with your friends and you had to make a solar power car. And there was all different things that it was tested on, right? Like how fast it actually worked and if the mechanics are right. And then there was like a verbal where you got like quizzed. And I mean, I did no homework on it. And I could tell you I was no expert on solar power cars. But I remember like we aced the verbal because of my ability to talk out of my ass. And that's all it was.
I would just like to point out that my team would have beat yours if the friggin' Mr. Hicks didn't break our solar-powered car right before the test.
Usually I say no names, but that name should stay in because that's funny in the context of what happened.
You guys all be Team Sofa King Nasty, though, didn't you?
Yeah, we were Team X. Actually, to mention that, teacher, the one thing I remember was somebody was like acting up. It wasn't any of us.
That was the
and he just
Terminator
had like
moment,
sunglasses
right?
on, and he just turns to me, he's like, "I did not grant you permission to stand." I was like, "What?" Like, uh-oh. But yeah, to circle it back, I always thought like debating is fun for me in a way, and I'm sure for Ferg too. So maybe that's why we get into it. But I do get frustrated after a while.
Sometimes I'll be working and I'll go in to check the work chat like 2 hours after I've been in there after a call or something. It'll be like 400 unread messages. I'm like, I know. I don't even need to fucking look at what's happening right now.
I do the same when Ferg and like Gordo get into world news arguments. I'm like, no, I'm not interested in this. This isn't fun.
Yeah, but then like amidst that conversation will be like something important about the podcast, and I scroll through all of that crap because I just don't care about the argument. And then they'll be like, "Well, we put it in the chat 2 days ago." It's like, yeah, well, you're also arguing for 4 hours about something else, and I got lost.
Yeah, amidst all the anti-political stuff and with you two, and then Gordo just posting 8 memes. There's something about what we had to do that you totally missed.
Yeah, right.
Or Joe talking about shitty 70s wrestlers doing arm bars.
His name is Art Bar, and show him some respect. He's not alive anymore.
You probably shouldn't show him that much respect. He did have some
Yeah, well, that's a lot.
some stuff that's not respectful. But he was the big juicer.
To get back into this debate, Kotter tells Washington, like, "Hey, head up there, like, lead the troops." And he's like, "I've never done this before. Like, I don't have anything prepared. Like, I've never talked in public before." It's like, "You've never talked in public?" Which is weird because he is so, like, confident when he talks amongst the class.
Yeah, that's his character.
Yeah, he's like, "No, only in church." He's like, "Well, get up there and do that. Do what you do in church." And he gives a very sermon-like delivery as he's talking.
I died at that.
That was really funny.
I think this is my favorite part of the whole episode was his like weird preacher impression he does here.
I was hoping he was gonna break in a dance at the end, like you do.
Pull out a couple snakes.
He's like, "I seen it in the history books. I seen it in the streets." He's going, and everyone's cheering him on. And that's when that girl's like, Mr. Woodman, Washington isn't following the rules. He isn't following the rules."
She says like,
rules.
rules.
Yeah.
Drove me nuts. Rules.
I had to type the word wrong in my notes so I'd remember to say it the incorrect way she said.
How did you spell rules?
RU-ELES.
I have it RU-ALS. So we were both doing similar.
I had to remember to say it like incorrectly, but the hyphen had to be in there.
The
Ruwell.
Ruwells.
They're doing all this to prove aggression's a real thing, and well, not a real thing, but that it's necessary. And by doing that, they're angering the other team.
It's smart. I think they're doing a better job of proving that it's like unavoidable in reality. But yeah, exactly. We're finding it's like they're so clever in their ways of it's the do the work to not have to do the work thing.
The J-Gag special.
Yeah. Now it's time for them to bring up their guy, Todd, and he's going to be the rebuttal. And they start off with the, "Hi, Todd." And he's already a little agitated. He's like, "Friends and esteemed adversaries." And then Horseshack's like, "Time's up."
I thought that was funny.
And he's like getting super pissed. And like, he's getting really aggressive towards him. At one point, he's saying that they're not even human. And you get the, "Hey, off my case, potato face."
That's
Potato
so wrong when
face.
you know the right one.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's getting out of hand now because now he's like lunging at them, like ready to get into a fight with the Sweathogs over all this stuff. And that's at this point when Kotter's like, "What are you guys doing?" And he's like, "Look, it's cool. Trust us. Like, we have a plan." He's like, "No," he's like, "It's not." And then the kid's like, "Hey, listen, I don't mind the interruptions, Mr. Kotter, but they're proving what they are." And it's like, "Yeah, you know what you are, Todd? You're white bread."
Ooh.
Yeah, they get real offended by the white bread comment.
And that's when he essentially threatens to punch them repeatedly over and over and tell them to shut up. And he's like, Barbarino's like, "How are we going to shut up? You said we weren't human." And Epstein's like, "Yeah, we're animals." Like growls at him. And he screams like, "Shut up, shut up." And then the time runs out. And his team's like, "Come on, you're blowing it." And it's like, "No, man, he already blew it."
Yep.
And it was like, that's it. There you go. There's the aggressive boy. Woodman decides to cancel the debate on an account of dumbness, which is a great official reason to end something.
Imagine if we had a officiant officiating our podcast for dumbness.
I think you'd call it right there as soon as you heard that statement.
My one issue with this whole scene, though, I think maybe if they cut out the end part, they could have let this go on a little longer and had the other people maybe keep the decorum a little longer and then just kind of snap, because they are a very short fuse and they get to them a lot faster than I thought they should have.
They could have taken turns like taking down the three kids one by one.
Yeah, until they
Yeah.
snap, and then you get this.
At least have the other kid come up, the other guy on the team, because the girl, like he's not following the rules. Like she's already pissed. So you got her, and then you got this kid. So yeah, maybe give the other kid time to get up and get angry too, and try a different tactic on him to like knock them all down, and that might have been the play.
When I looked up the actress who plays Judy, the Ruwells girl,
Yep.
I was like looking up to see if she was in anything, and then the one credit I saw that I just hope is what I want it to be is she's a reporter in the made-for-TV O.J. Simpson movie. That I just really hope that is her going, "But O.J. Simpson wasn't following the rules!" Just like dancing around the blood.
Maybe it's because this the time and like where the show is at, like it's 70s New York, but I was ready for you to say like, and she was in the Warriors.
Is that the Cuba Gooding Jr. one?
No, this is one from like 94, like right when it was happening.
Oh, must have been great.
Oh, somebody really capitalized on that one quickly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they did that right away. I'm sure.
God bless America.
I know, right? Well, we've talked about it before that like OJ was like just indicted and you couldn't walk around without seeing like a "Don't Squeeze the Juice" t-shirt or Pogs and Slammers with him on it. So they really capitalized on that one quick. I can't imagine that happening again
No.
the same way.
No.
It's weird. I mean, it's quite a pivot, but when you look at something like the OJ stuff, and it's also the times, right? This is again, we're all glued to our televisions more. We don't have outlets to watch as much stuff. Much like when you said, like, even though there's a lot more channels in the 90s, but like when we were talking about Carson, there's only a couple things to watch. You couldn't just escape and look at your phone and stuff. So it's on every news channel at once. It's cutting in. Everyone's talking about it. It becomes this big pop thing. And then also because of like it being in a different time technology-wise, like nowadays with all the forensics and cameras everywhere and smartphones, like I don't think like a celebrity could get away with anything like that to that degree where it would even be this drawn out.
There's also no Twitter back then, so there was no one to say, like, "He's a fucking murderer. You're a piece of shit for wearing that shirt."
That's true too.
Yeah.
But like imagine like I don't know, I'm trying to think of somebody who was like ex-football player or whatever who acts now, right? But is not a huge star or something. Like if that happened to
Peyton Manning?
Yeah, Peyton Manning, perfect, right.
Yeah.
If it happened to Peyton Manning, there wouldn't be t-shirts that were like, chicken parm, you murder so good. Like, they wouldn't do that right away, and they wouldn't be fucking everywhere, you know what I mean? The way the OJ stuff was just everywhere. Also, chicken parm comes up a lot.
I was gonna say, I think we're letting the fact that you came up with it quick gave you a pass on how weird that was.
Yeah, well...
For an example.
Well, you said Peyton Manning, I know one thing about him, and it's that he sings the Chicken Parm You Taste So Good song. I know nothing else about him. I would have said, like, Troy Aikman or, like, Bo Sanders? No, Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson, I was going for.
Oh, God. I'm so embarrassed for you.
The funny thing is, you're like, I'm so embarrassed for you. It bothers me none. I don't give a shit about football. I don't know.
So Bo Jackson and Barry Sanders are the two people you combined.
Man, you just made a superstar just now.
Bo.
Yeah, maybe they'll have a baby and he'll be the greatest football player of all time. And if he's part Bo, he can be somewhat decent at baseball as well.
He should be good. It's not, Dad. I want to dance.
Not with Bo Jackson's knees. But yeah, so to close out this scene, all the turkeys are about to head out. The debate's over. And the other teacher, Wells, right before he leaves, says to Kotter, like, hey, I have one thing to say to you. He's like, go ahead. In your socks with a pound of locks. He's got a little bit of Sweathog in him, too.
Yeah.
Was he former Sweathog? Is he half Sweathog?
I don't think it's been established, or maybe it's just rubbing off on him.
I like to think that teacher went flipped out on the turkeys after. You lost to the fucking Sweathogs in a debate.
He was a perspirating piggy.
Would you rather be a potato face, have somebody put a hose up your nose, or have somebody put a bunch of smoked salmon in your socks? Because I feel like
the smoked salmon in the socks is the least.
Oh.
What about some old onion socks? Go on.
Oh. I thought he meant like padlocks.
That's what I meant. I thought too, actually.
I thought locks like
I
salmon,
thought locks
too.
like fish on a bagel.
No, I thought it was like Madball.
Jay, do you have the script? Because it would be spelled differently.
I have a transcript, which a lot of these episodes, when I look back to try to get like phrases and stuff, they're not like real scripts. They're the transcript versions, which are people typing out what they hear. So it's spelled like a padlock, but it doesn't mean that that's necessarily correct. But when I heard it, that's what I thought. Because when you say pound of locks, I'm thinking it's like the idea of it being weighted. So I'm thinking of like a piece of metal like that.
But you buy fish in pounds.
That's true. No, listen, it could be either one. I guess it's up for debate.
I'm not saying I'm right. I think we both have all of us here have a
They
strong
didn't
argument either
elaborate.
side.
Yeah, so it could go either way.
But I'd rather have a pound of padlocks in my socks than fish.
Apparently that it's locks as in like a padlock, because in prison you put them in socks and beat people with them.
Yeah.
Well, now
I'm
we
guessing
know.
he's saying he wants to kill Mr. Kotter.
Also in prison, they put rubber hoses in your nose.
That's not a rubber hose, and that's not your nose that you're thinking of.
They all leave. Freddy's like, hey, our plan worked. It's like, well, it was a terrible plan, but like, I'm proud of you guys for having a plan. As
I
terrible
don't
as
think
it
it was a terrible plan.
Yeah, it worked pretty
I think it's a
quickly.
great plan.
Yeah, I think it was too.
I think it was a great plan. I think from Kotter's perspective, I really wish you guys studied and did homework and you just found a clever way out of it. But that's when he goes, okay, Rosalie, give it to me now. And she starts again with the, give me an S, give me a W, give me an E, A, T. And they all join in and spell out hogs. But hogs isn't long enough, so they have to make it hogs with 3 Gs.
Wild Sweathogs. It's a mashup movie that they missed the opportunity on.
So now for the next scene, we get Gabe, who's back home with his wife sitting at the dinner table. And he's like, oh, did I tell you I saw Larry Simon yesterday? And he's telling a story that, I saw him walking with his hands out. And when he said, hey, what do you have in your hands? It was a toad. And it's like, well, what's he doing with the toad? He's like, that's what I said. It's like, apparently he was taking him to the zoo. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, except I saw him today and he was still walking down the street and he had the toad in his hands. And he said, I thought you took it to the zoo. Like, I did. And now today I'm taking it to the movies.
I loved this.
I had the exact opposite reaction. I think that makes all the sense in the world, Gordo.
It's corny. I like, so the way they deliver it, I condensed it down a bit. There's a lot of like her asking questions, and every time she'd ask a question, it was like, well, that's what I said. And he repeats what she said. It's goofy. Like, even though the jokes are usually about his uncle and stuff, it's like, it's weird, like dad joke, uncle humor. Like, that's what it is.
I like the relationship they have. I just think this joke is bad.
No, this is golden.
It's a dumb dad joke, but I'll say, like, I didn't know the punchline ahead of time, so I mean, I wouldn't say I was in hysterics, but I found it amusing.
I think the only way that joke could make you actually laugh would be if Norm Macdonald said it and there was somehow like 3 extra minutes involved in the delivery of it. Then it would have been the greatest joke of all time.
Through blood and bones. But Norm Macdonald was the best.
Yeah, man, what a hard RIP that is.
He had a sitcom, right, Norm?
It's great. Yeah, we should do it.
Yeah, we need to do that soon.
It's him and Laurie Metcalf from Roseanne is one of the main
Oh,
characters.
okay, nice. Yeah, so that was the whole episode. To like get into it again, like I said, me and Ferg watched the pilot episode, and the pilot episode, which was aired third, not even second. And again, it's one of those things. Nick, you said you kind of read something about how a lot of pilot episodes were kind of not intended to be episode ones, or
Nowadays, a pilot is kind of built to be the first episode also, but back in, 70s, 80s, it was really just a pitch tool. So I don't think when these episodes were recorded that they were intended to be the first episode. It was just, and it doesn't even need to be like an introductory thing. Like these pilots don't need to have like perfect introduction, everything. It just needed to be an interesting episode, right? So these pilot episodes were built just to get the studio to sign on, and they didn't necessarily need to like start the story or anything like that. So
my thing is, in those cases, you don't even have to air them sometimes, because we see so many shows that they change drastically. Like, last week we did Blossom, and there were shifts in names of characters and casting changes and all that. And then you kind of wonder, like, why do you even air this, right? Because this was filmed in advance. But this one here was an origin story. It was actually, the pilot episode is Kotter's first day at the school when he gets the job. And they really detail each character and tell you a lot about each Sweathog. So it was like, this makes a lot of sense to be the first episode. And it was funny. So I don't know why they didn't just make it the actual first episode, because it was good enough. Like, it wasn't like an unfunny episode or anything.
But also, its placement at number 3 doesn't make any sense, because now you know all these people and now you're just having to meet them on the first day.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Like, you could throw it out of order if it wasn't an origin story, like Nick was saying. Like, if they did it that way, then you could throw it wherever.
Yeah.
But here, it clearly was his first day of school. So it's very weird that if you're watching this show, like, oh, I like this new show on ABC, and then by week 3, it's like his first day of school. You're like, wait, what? I thought we've already established this.
It's the exact same thing that happened with Coach, where even though the Coach, we understood why they did it with Coach, right? Because they made him...
Coach went the other way, kind of, though, didn't it?
No, it was the episode that was like the intended original show. The first episode that they did second was the daughter moving in to the school, and then they ended up not using that as the first episode.
So you watch an episode where she's already there, and then you watch her move in. It just makes no sense. But that's a different case, though, because that makes him an unlikable person.
Yeah, that was the thing with that pilot. It was a bad pilot, so they had to not introduce you that way.
I think what you need to take away from this is that just protocol has changed in the last 50 years, and that's really all that it is. TV, I mean, a sitcom is still a sitcom, but the way they went about it is much different than they do now.
And just for clarification, go to a sitcom is what?
A situational comedy.
There you go. You know what's crazy, Nick, as you say it? I mean, it's legit 2 years away from this being a 50-year-old episode.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, what? Like, I know this was before we were even born.
50 years seems like a long-ass time.
Yeah.
And and then you see somebody like John Travolta, who has gone crazy in his old age for the most part.
Still looks good.
He still looks good, yeah.
I think he looks good with the shaved head. He pulls it off well.
Yeah. He looks like Randy Couture.
He does.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Also, if anybody hasn't seen it, the movie he's in that's directed by Fred Durst is a good watch.
I've wanted to see it. I haven't seen it yet, and I do really want to see it.
I think we've talked about it. The only really downfall of that movie is the indulgence where Fred Durst feels the need to put Limp Bizkit songs into it, which just doesn't need to fucking happen, man.
You got to give it to him. You got to give it all for the nookie.
The what?
Did you see how,
nookie.
To get back into Kotter real quick, that Farrah Fawcett was originally considered to play the role of Julie Kotter, but they were like, oh no, this isn't believable that...
Yeah. Like, no offense, Gabe, but...
Yes,
Nice try, Gabe.
The girl who got the job was like, wait, so what does that say about me? Like,
yeah, that's a bummer. But, I mean, Farrah Fawcett, especially at that time, was one of like the most... It's like, yeah, you can't be married to like Farrah Fawcett or like Bo Derek. I'm sorry. It has to be like a more normal looking person.
To be fair, if I were casting myself in the starring role of a sitcom, I would try something like that too.
Oh, you got to give it to him, yeah.
Yeah.
Adam Sandler, he always has like a smoke show wife, and then he goes on vacation in every movie he does. It's genius.
The only other thing about this show that I wanted to bring up was the other show that I can think of would be Taxi, but the intros are just kind of like going through the city, right? And every scene in the intro, I'm just like, ugh. Like, it just looks like such an awful place to be ever.
Like grimy New York in the 70s.
It's just like everything is tagged and dirty and trafficky, and I don't know if they're trying to like glamorize the city in these intro, like these I can't think of the word I'm looking for, like montage.
Always Sunny's
sort
like
of,
that
yeah.
too, but Always Sunny doesn't show you like dirt.
Yeah, it just seems like 70s, 80s New York City was just like not fun to be in at all.
I would say it's probably very fun to be in, just not safe to be in.
So,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I guess
Like,
there's a difference.
Old New York
but-
was a different time, but if you're a fan of the cocaine, I think you probably would have had a great time in 70s New York.
Yeah, but a lot of it was like the city went bankrupt at one point. The government wouldn't give them any assistance. I forget what there's like a famous headline that says like New York F you, because they like reached out for more money or whatever, and that's why buildings were becoming like abandoned and falling apart and like this wasteland. There wasn't enough cops like to combat the amount of crime there was, and that's why people who were lucky and bought like these weird buildings in like Brooklyn for like $400 in like the most dangerous part of the city in 1975 then sold them like 4 years ago for like $100 million because now the property is worth just crazy amounts, and all these people bought these buildings a long time ago as investments, and it paid off.
But yeah, I think we pretty much covered about as much as we can for this episode and this show. I guess the only other thing before the green light are canceled that, comes to mind right now is I would have been interested because we were introduced to the show after the fact, and there's so much cultural reference that, like, especially in the 90s when it kind of got that Nick at Night run, but like I really would have liked to have seen like how big was it really in the 70s, because it had a moderate run, but it faded out kind of quickly.
I honestly think it's the rising star of John Travolta that killed the show.
Travolta, and then there was also just issues with Gabe Kaplan and stuff, and he was having issues with the network and the producers, and so like it kind of fell apart a little bit. The ratings did start to decline, I guess, the third or fourth season, especially when Travolta had less of a presence.
Well, after Carrie killed Travolta, it was hard to get him on the show.
It's
Yeah.
true. Plug it up.
Do you think like if Travolta hadn't done those movies that were like, forget Carrie, but like Grease and Saturday Night Fever, which are like two of the biggest movies of all time, I guess Carrie in that genre is huge.
I mean, Carrie was very big at the time too, but I mean, Saturday Night Fever was like, I think maybe still to this day might even be the best-selling soundtrack of all time. Like, it was such a monster across all fronts.
Now, if he stays on the show and Kaplan is good with them and is on the show more, and they can stretch it out a little bit and find a way to make it work, do you think this becomes like a huge, like top of all time show?
And I'll tell you why. They would have tried to make John Travolta way too much of a part of it. They would wanted to have capitalized on his fame, and one of two things would have happened. They wouldn't have written it the right way, and him being the center of everything would have looked stupid, or two, the rest of the cast would have been pissed and found their way out of the show. I don't think there's a single way that could have worked.
Well, think of this issue too. They're all older than they're playing anyway, and they're in high school, which is only 4 years.
Exactly. That's what you do, though. You have them graduate, and then you bring in the next class of Sweathogs. You do Welcome Back Kotter, the new class, or Welcome Back Kotter, the college years.
Yeah, but as a person who likes the new class, I'm like the only person who likes the new class.
I think you go the Boy Meets World route though,
And
you
have Kotter be the professor, yeah.
Yeah, Kotter, and I guess that was like a pitched potential thing too, that like these kids are already too old to be in high school at the start of the show. And that's one of those things we've talked about, like when we just watched, we covered That 90s Show, if you guys hadn't heard us do that episode. There it's like, oh, these kids are too young, but they're the right age, because shows like this always cast so old for, 16-year-olds. So when you see them, it comes off weird to you, because they're all in their mid-20s. And like, that's what we view, when we were kids, what we viewed high school kids as. They were really adults that we just thought were kids.
Do we get any failed spin-offs from this?
Yes, only one. So there's 3 total. All 3 of them were backdoor pilots, but only one made it to production. and it stars Pat Morita.
So what was it based on?
It was called Cobra Kai.
Oh, interesting.
It was called Mr. T and Tina. So
That-
different Mr. T, because this is pre-Clubber Lang. And he was an eccentric inventor that he was like on an episode of it. He was like a weird character they met who was like this eccentric inventor or whatever. And they spun it off into his own show. And then a bunch of the Sweathogs are on some of the episodes too. They do that with the spinoffs where it's like put people in from the other show too, but it only lasted like less than a season. And that was while he was already on, I think, Happy Days too.
Speaking of backdoor pilots, somebody had messaged us on Instagram at S1E1 Pod and mentioned that they would be interested in seeing us do backdoor pilots. And I meant to ask you guys in our chat, and I just completely forgot about it. How do you feel about doing a backdoor pilot?
Not falling for that again.
I like the idea of if they're like regular season episodes in the middle of a series, we have to find like a different way to approach it.
Right, because even the first thing I thought of, and I think the person who messaged us even brought it up, like the farm episode of The Office
Yeah.
is a backdoor pilot. It's obviously not the first televised episode of either the pilot or the show that it's on, but it is a really interesting concept as far as we go, I think.
I think it's like a special, like something we need to maybe figure out how to make a special out of it and tackle a bunch of them without deep diving, like super deep diving, like a random episode.
Well, here's
Right.
the interesting thing, right? So there are two different kinds of backdoor pilots. There's a kind like The Farm with The Office, where you've got a main character from that show, and then it revolves around them and a bunch of new people. But there's also the backdoor pilots that they sort of in the first couple minutes spin out into a whole different thing. Specifically thinking of, there's one for Facts of Life that's about an all-boys like military school. And like the first episode of that is just like, oh, my cousin Peter, like first minute, like they mention something,
Right.
and it's just
Yeah.
an entire episode with those people. So like those ones would be really easy to do because you're kind of just doing a different TV show.
Like an actual season 1, episode 1. Yeah,
Right.
It's easier to do.
That said, though, for the other kind, I would be totally down to do them as long as we already had covered the show
That it spins off. Yeah, okay.
that
yeah.
spins off from.
We'll hit the chat and talk about that because I think people heard us talk about Welcome Back, Kotter long enough to get into the green light or cancels. Let's start this off. Let's switch it up. Joe, starting with you this time.
Sure, this is a green light, and I was a little hesitant at first because I don't think this is the best episode of this show, and I don't think it's the most representative of what the show is. But it's funny. The characters are there. They do enough. I said in the beginning, it works as itself as a pilot anyway because you understand the dynamic of everybody. Enough laughs in it. James Woods pops in. It's a classic sitcom. It does have a little bit of nostalgia feels, and I know that shouldn't pull me in any direction, but I mean, it's Welcome Back, Kotter. It's hard to say no. It's a green light.
Ferg.
This one, more than other episodes, I had a really hard time not focusing on what I already knew about the show. Like, I brought it up 100 times this episode. Just like all their like trademark things. And I was waiting for them and they weren't popping up other than like a few. It's not like Joe said, it's not the best pilot. Oh, sorry, it's not the best first episode. But even not the best first episode is better than a lot of other shit we covered. I love the dynamic of the entire group. Everyone has, their own role. I like Mr. Kotter coming from where they were, so understanding them. I wish they went with the actual pilot so you got, a better understanding of each character, but they gave you enough. And I love how they showed that they're not book smart, but they're street smart in coming up with the plan to beat the actual debaters. So, all in all, it's a green light for me.
Gordo.
Yeah, it's a green light for me. It's a smart show. It's funny. I enjoyed watching the show front to back. It was nostalgic. It just kind of hit everything. It hit everything. It got the point across. I liked how smart it was, and it was equally as witty and equally as funny. And for some reason, like, you can tell that these characters have a really good chemistry with one another. And I think we failed to kind of touch on that, but they all have a really good rapport, probably because this was not the intended pilot. But for an intended pilot that I don't know anything else, these guys seem like mid-season run with the way that their characters are gelling and fleshed out. It's a green light. I laughed, and the Toad joke wrote me in. Green light.
Nick.
Yeah, like Gordo said towards the end there, I really liked how well the characters or how comfortable characters seem to be in their skins there. It really worked. I'll tell you this. Kotter himself was not my favorite part of this episode. I think he could use some polishing. The rest of the cast was a lot of fun. The story was a little basic. I was a little on the fence with this one. Nostalgia gets in the way. I feel like greenlighting it, considering how we do it, my answer might change if I'm greenlighting or canceling this in the 70s versus now, because I see it now as like another student sitcom, like a, teacher and students thing. But then you got to think that this is one of the first ones that did it, and they did it well, and they kind of paved the way too. So it's going to be a green light for me, albeit a slightly softer one than I would have expected to give this show. But at the end, it is a green light.
Yeah, so I'm with you guys. I'm giving it the green light as well. And again, interesting because I did watch the pilot episode first and then had to kind of erase that real quick and watch this. And there are definitely aspects where I can understand why they swapped it, in that this seems like a little bit more of a fleshed out, complete show. But I thought the pilot did a better job maybe kind of introducing it to everybody. But we've said before, you don't always need the origin story. This was just a fun watch to me, and I liked it, and I tried to take my nostalgia away from it. And it was fun. You could tell that all the actors in it were having a good time. Like, they were having fun with it. A lot of these older shows, I don't think they went into nauseam with a million takes. So you can see actors like kind of giving genuine smiles a lot in some of these older shows that you don't catch as much now. It was just fun. And so it's a green light. It would have been a green light if I was rating the other episode. It was just an overall fun watch. So that's a 5 out of 5 for Welcome Back, Kotter. So congrats.
Elusive 5-timers club.
You live on to see another
Especially
episode.
after last week, it was a 5 cancel. Now we have
a rare 5 no's.
So it'll be fun to, I might kind of try to catch a couple of these episodes as I go to bed. I don't know, is there a streaming site for these?
I was just going to ask you that.
It used to be on Nick at Night. Do they own the rights?
I don't know how any of that works. It's an ABC show.
It does not appear to be on any subscription service for free. You can buy on Apple TV, Vudu, Amazon Prime, YouTube. You can buy it, but as far as actually being, and this is Google, who is, for what Google is terrible.
No, I can back that up though, because I had to buy the episode.
Okay, yeah. So
usually when I type it in on the Fire Stick, it'll come on to whatever's free, and then if nothing else, there's the option to buy. The option to buy was the only thing that came up, so I had to buy it on Prime.
It looks like it's $20 a season to buy if you want an HD.
They didn't film it in HD. I don't need HD. Welcome Back, Kotter. It's filmed in the 70s on tape.
It's also $19.99 to buy an SD.
Oh, okay. Well, great.
Usually there's a price differential there. I don't know why there wasn't.
For $79.96, now I think I'm in. So
Yeah.
good to know. Yeah, anyway, so go find it if you can. Welcome Back, Kotter. It's a fun show. I don't know if it's syndicated anywhere, but it's available. Google it. You'll find some sites.
I think it's on MeTV on Sunday mornings. I saw somewhere.
Well, maybe it'll be on MeTV later, too, when I'm watching something tonight. Waka waka. So thanks to everyone who listened. Make sure you go to S1E1pod.com. That's where you can find all the links to where to watch us, where to subscribe, everything like that, our social medias. Primarily go to S1E1pod on Twitter and Instagram. That's where we post the most. We definitely like to interact with you guys, so hit us up. Let us know shows you guys want to watch. We try to get some fan pics in there. It's been fun tackling some of those, and we like to reply to all of you guys. It's been really cool getting to know some of you guys over the last couple years. So again, S1E1 Pod, thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you again next week with our 2-year anniversary episode, so make sure you listen in on that one. Thanks, guys. Catch you then. Goodbye.
I think we got the best rules.